one of the letters matched. It's like, what are these guys doing? And then they lost all credibility. But then I found, when I found the way the language worked, it's like, oh, I see.
So the vav really just connects it.
The vav and the yod are like wild cards. You can drop it in. A hey is like the expression of, so zadik is righteous. Zadikah is righteousness. It's what it looks like to be righteous. That's adding a hey at the end. But not every time. So you have to then get to be familiar with the use of the language, which is why you get the stones through the thumb to knock, and you have to start looking at it. Okay, but here's what het vav resh. Now what I could do is look at het resh hey, and I could put the various prefixes in front. I could look at aleph het resh, bet het resh, hey het resh, vav het resh, yod het resh, kaf het resh, lamed, mem, nun, shin, and tav are all prefixes. And what I found is that you might not find a word, but then you start dropping in these other prefixes and you'll find that the word shows up. And a lot of times there'll be some differences, but a lot of times, every time you add a prefix, every one of them are the same meaning. Slight nuances of difference. And then you say, well, the nuances or difference between the prefixes is because you know what the prefix is. If nun means to engage in the action, then you stick a nun in front of the het resh, and it'll show you the het resh in action. And it's like, oh, because so a lot of this is like just doing this analysis. And it all is just by trial and error.
Eric,
Yes.
how do you deal with idioms?
Idioms? How do you know what's an idiom? You don't. Now you have to guess. So now what the
It's
thing
raining
is,
cats. It's raining cats and dogs.
here's the thing. I think it was Michael Root or Nehemiah Gordon saying, boy, there's all these idioms, and I think one of those guys, maybe it was Nehemiah, was going to do like a whole book on idioms. I haven't seen it. I don't know what the idioms are. So here's what I'm saying. Unless it's blatantly clear that something is, this is like that, or what if it's not an idiom? What if it became an idiom? For example, there's this one verse that says, like a mist in the morning when the sun comes out and it gets hot, then such and such and such and such. Well, that's an idiom. I mean, you have to translate it literally, but how's it an idiom? Well, it's a metaphor, actually. What happens to a mist when the sun comes out and it gets hot? The mist disappears. And what he's saying there is there was this great kingdom of strength, like this thick mist where you can't see anything, and within minutes, poof, it's gone. It's like, where was that? That's what it's actually saying. That's kind of an idiomatic, sort of metaphorical sort of statement, but as I've been going through and looking at this stuff, I'm assuming there is no idioms. Unless you find one that's blatantly, clearly an idiomatic sort of use. But again, this is an assumption as a hypothesis and saying, let's just take it at face value and see what it says.
And poetry?
You could do the same thing. You'd have to almost look at case by case. I'm not saying there is no idioms. What I'm saying is, it's like the vowel points. What do you do? And now here, I'm trying to show you the Valahim Aktrim, and somebody else might completely disagree, but I'm showing you what I found, which I found personally very disturbing. Het vav resh, to grow white or pale. Made evident, clarified. White stuff, a hole. A hole is a het vav resh. What does a hole have to do with white stuff to make clear or evident? An aperture or the socket of the eye. Well, it didn't say the eyeball, it said the socket of the eye. But what goes in the socket of the eye? A white eyeball. Now we, in our country, we don't really see eyeballs very much. You know, I mean, you see the iris and it's sort of the white. But see, back in these days, people were getting their eyes plucked out by their enemies, and they were in battle, and their eyes were getting plucked out, and they're seeing these eyeballs laying there, and the birds pluck out the eyeballs as the body's laying there, and it's like, it was probably more common to them. At least to me.
No, I get it. I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at you. It's just I'd never thought of it in those terms. I'm thinking of it going. I can just see the next Spielberg movie. You know, instead of blood splattering.
There was one movie, I think it was one of the pirate movies, where they had the body of one of these guys in a cave that they had tortured, and he had long died, and a crow flies over and plucks his eyeball out.
Excalibur. Well, that wasn't in a cave, though. That was in a tree, but yeah.
But I've used it more than once.
Yeah.
It's such an image. Anyway,
I was hungry.
but this word het vav resh also means nobleman, nobleman, and then it has the het resh next to het vav resh. And it's like, a nobleman. Who are the noblemen? The powdered white wigs of England and France, they're the white-headed
Yeah,
guys.
of course.
White hair. White-haired noblemen, the people you give respect to. The one with white hair, like Jesse Duplantis up on the
Yeah.
stage, you know, the white-haired guy, like, wow, he must be really smart.
Yeah.
He must be like even Bill Clinton with white hair now, you know, it's like,
Oh,
he's one of our big shots. If this word, het resh, is a white-haired nobleman, or a big shot, and the word ach means a brother, or somebody you'd sit around the fireplace with, one of your kinsmen,
Big brother.
kind of like a big brother. Next, strange, other, future, delayed, postponed, kept back, later on. Not somebody that your forefathers of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov are familiar with. Who claims to be an Elohim. Sound like anybody you know? Yahweh presents himself to Israel and says, I'm telling you who I am, and I'm giving you my identity. If anybody who claims to be an Elohim, or a mighty one, who comes later on, delayed, tarried, kept back in the future from this time, that your ancestors, Abraham, Yaakov, and Yitzhak, didn't know. And he's kind of like one of your brothers who's a nobleman, somebody with high regard, that you give all this, wow, look at his preeminence. Al Panay. Al Panay. Well, the word Panay is face. But as we discussed the other day, Panay also is mouth, jumps out of my own, which makes something happen, or goes to work, which is also be considered a word. Right? A word jumps out of your mouth and it's your own thing when it causes something to happen. What is this Ayin Lam?
So is Zapnet, whatever his name is.
Strong
Zaphnath Paneah.
Strong tea.
That's the same word, isn't it? It's
Panay. Yeah, Paneah is the same root of that. Paneah, yes.
strong teacher?
This here,
No, Al.
Al Panay.
Oh, that's
Aleph
an
Lamed
ayin.
is strong.
Yeah,
This is an
that's-
ayin.
That's an ayin.
So I'm going to read you all the meanings of the word Ayin Lamed. Remind me if I don't go there to the place where he says he has exalted his word above all his name.
I
In Psalm. Okay, this says, this is Ayin Lamed. Height, upper part, or above. So if you go to an Aliyah festival, this is Ayin Lamed. Aliyah festival, you go up to Jerusalem. On, upon, above, at, beside, toward, against, concerning, about, because of, on account of, together with. Combining form meaning super, as in supernatural. It's a yoke. Ayin Lamed Aleph would mean height. Ayin Lamed Aleph Vav Tav would be superiority or supremacy. Ayin Lamed Aleph Yod would be superior or supreme. Ayin Lamed Hey, which is the revealing of the Ayin Lamed sort of stuff, means go up or ascend. Sprang up, shot forth, rose, surpassed, excelled, was reckoned or counted in, was considered, succeeded, was successful, immigrated to Israel, make Aliyah, taken away, caused to rise, to go on up, promoted to a higher dignity, taken up into, was inserted, like being taken up into the clouds would be the word Ayin Lamed Hey. To be prized, lifted himself up, raised in price, raised in value. It's also the leaf of a book, a folio. It also is a cause, a pretext, or occasion. That's Ayin Lamed Hey. And if you look at Ayin Lamed and add the Hey, it'll give you some sense of it. But this is all about rising up or giving high regard to. Do not let there be a mighty one, a god of somebody else, who is a brother or a white-haired nobleman that you give high regard to, that's yoked to my face or my word. That's yoked to my face. Now, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to bash anybody's belief, but who is Jesus Christ? Is he not yoked to his face? He is the face of Elohim, the tangible, seeable face. And he's the Word made flesh. He's one of our brother who's very ennobled. And he's an Elohim. And yet when I think, don't let there be any gods of others, but he's not talking about Jesus. He's talking about them heathens, those Hindus, those Buddhists. But then I started looking at Hebrew, and I thought, am I following an Elohim Akri? Certainly not me. I have the true belief. He's not an Elohim Akri Al Panei, but he is exactly an Elohim Akri Al Panei, especially if you say, what about these 16 crucified saviors? What about Constantine going around, gathering up all the gods and the Elohim of others, bringing back and compiling them into the form of Christianity, and now worship him? Him? What about Yahweh? He's the mean old God of the Bible, of the Old Testament. We got General Jesus we can mind. Oh, but Jesus never denied worship, they say. He never turned his back on being worshipped. Did Yeshua ever demand to be worshipped? Never. Yeshua said, they said, show us the Father. He says, if you see me, you see the Father. Why? Because they're God. But what does that mean? If Father says, worship Yod Vav He, the word worship is Ayin Bet Dalet, Obed, Obadiah, the same word in the scriptures. Obedience is the word, Obed. It's the same word meaning worship, it's the word meaning to serve, and it's the word for slave. When he says Obed Yahweh, Obed Yah, Obadiah, it means worship Yahweh. Be a servant of Yahweh. Be enslaved to Yahweh. Only, we don't have to do that. We're going to do what Jesus said and follow him, which means we don't have to do any of that. Is that not an Elohim Akrim Al Panei? What is an Elohim Akrim Al Panei? I need to know. Because Yahweh hates this and is constantly criticizing Israel for going after Elohim Akrim Al Panei.
But you can't deny that he doesn't look so peaceful as a surfer dude with the long, beautiful brown hair, and you know he looks good.
He's an Akrim.
It's the opposite of what the Bible says about Jesus.
He was so...
The picture we have of him on the wall.
Right. So I'm saying what you're saying is that he's saying he had no countenance that we should regard him.
Oh.
And when they finally decided to kill him, they were kind of like saying, we're sick of having his face in our face. Just kill him, get him out of here. We just don't even like to look at him. He might have looked kind of deformed. He might have been the wrong racial color. He might have had weird hair with a cowlick sticking out here. And it's like, that ain't no Messiah.